flying low above London to mark the 75 years since the end of the Second World War in Europe. Many fell silent to remember one of the world's worst conflicts.
All of us who were born since 1945 are acutely conscious that we owe everything we most value to the generation who won the Second World War. Today, we celebrate their achievement, we remember their sacrifice.
Hostilities will end.
On May the 8th, in 1945, Britain's wartime Prime Minister Winston Churchill addressed the nation. Nazi Germany, he'd told them, had surrendered. The Allied forces had crushed Nazism and fascism. After years of wartime restrictions, people kicked back, celebrating for hours and crowding the streets. How different it looks now, with all public gatherings and commemorations cancelled because of the coronavirus pandemic. And Britain's cities, towns and villages marking VE Day inside gardens. For nearly 7 weeks, people have lived in lockdown, and these parties are a way of coming together while safely staying apart, a way of showing unity, just like communities did 75 years ago. Across Europe, where tens of millions of people lost their lives in World War II, there were more pared-down commemorations because of coronavirus. France's President Emmanuel Macron laid a wreath at the tomb of the unknown soldier, while Angela Merkel led the remembrance at Germany's Central War Memorial in Berlin. The European Union was born out of the war, with former enemies coming together politically and economically to secure lasting peace.
What we have seen in the last 70 years is that the European project is remarkably flexible. Countries join, countries leave. The name of the organisation changes. The powers and the institutions that it relies on will develop and wax and wane. So the European Union is currently at a crossroads.
The resolve many people showed during World War II, along with the sacrifices they made, still inspire today and feel all the more pertinent in these times of crisis. Emma Hayward, Al Jazeera, Lincolnshire.
Richard FITZWILLIAMS is a British cultural affairs commentator from London. He says despite many parallels between the pandemic and the World War, the lack of unity has set the events apart.
And I think listening to the Queen when she speaks at 9 o'clock tonight, this is exactly the same time that her father, King George VI, broadcast to the Empire in 1945. We will be, so to speak, walking with history, because the Queen herself, when Princess Elizabeth at 19, she and her sister, Princess Margaret, slipped out of Buckingham Palace and celebrated with the rejoicing crowds. It's also, I would say, very likely that at a time of crisis like this, as countries in the world face the coronavirus epidemic, what we're looking at is the probability that the Queen will draw a parallel between the fight for freedom in the Second World War and what we're currently facing. I think that when dealing with a monstrous tyranny such as Nazi Germany and its allies, there was a sense that you knew where you were. I think one of the problems with facing this pandemic, COVID-19, which has so many characteristics, it affects different people in different ways, we're still finding out so much about it. There doesn't seem to be a coordinated international response.